What's up, guys? This is Pete. Welcome back to the Carrot Poker Podcast. I was doing a bit of research recently and I was listening to some other podcasts, basically to look to do a bit more outreach, publicity, that kind of thing for the book, for myself and for my coaching and all of that. And I realized that lots of people who do poker podcasts have like a cool like intro song, but also speaking over it, like "Welcome to the Carrot Poker Podcast," like as the intro's going, and it like states what the podcast is all about. Like, this is a podcast where I rant lots about poker and how much I hate it when students say X, Y, and Z. But I could do that, it'd be really cool. So maybe after like 50 episodes, it's finally time to upgrade. Maybe even employ the girlfriend so I can get like a female voice, which is such a rare treasure, in the poker world, it seems, especially in the online poker world. Get her to do like a voiceover for me and put on like a funky accent or something like that. I guess the Scottish accent would already be kind of funky to the rest of the world, just not to me. Anyways, today we're going to talk a little bit more about, well, how to analyze hand histories, and I have a candidate hand from the corner, from Carrot Corner, Google Plus student community, right in front of me. If you want to join the corner, by the way, and be able to take part in a great and upcoming poker study group that is full of good moderators, winning players, aspiring players, and fish, not fish, but weaker players, there's players of all kinds, then you can hire me as a coach and get free access, or you can pay a one-off fee to join. Email me, admin@Carrot Corner, if you want to join us in our pursuit to master this game. So, today's hand comes from another anonymous student, really nice guy actually. Big shout out to this dude, enjoyed working with him. He'll be listening to this, so I'll get points, for saying that. He'll figure out it's his hand, and there we go, happy days. But no, I've not done one of his hands before, so I like to sort of evenly space out whose hands I look at. So this hand is called Facing Min Raise OTR on the river by fish with king high flush on paired board. Okay, so already we can see that this is going to be one of these situations where a hero needs to only call a min raise on the river, but as we probably know from our population reads, our awareness of the tendencies of the population, min raises on the river from fish are typically really good hands. So are we going to be able to call with the king high flush? Let's find out. But first of all, we better check that the rest of the hand is okay, because when you post a hand for review in the Carrot Poker Podcast, like, you want to give all of your thoughts so that you can get critique on earlier streets as well, and make sure that your reasoning is sound there and your play is sound. Because even if your play is sound, like, your reasoning might not be, and you might have just saved yourself a bunch of EV in other spots that are related but a bit different, just by correcting a few thoughts that you thought were standard that did lead to a right play, but for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. So, hero goes on to write, villain is 4710, 1.9. I assume that's aggression factor, the third stat. Sometimes it's 3-bet, but I assume when it's not specified, it's aggression factor. Fold to flop c-bet stat of 41%. Turn 36, river 0. I mean, these stats, like, when you're getting to like river fold to c-bet stats, like over 404 hands, that's gonna be like a few occasions. With a fish, it'll be a few more than a few occasions, so maybe indication that he's a bit stationary. But I mean, you can assume that 47-10 with a fold to c-bet of 41 is going to be stationary anyway, to be honest. You don't really need those turn and river stats in there, but general picture does look like this guy is stationary. Anyway, flop raise in position is 11% over 19 hands. Okay, so that's information we've got so far. So pre-flop, what happens is that hero is, where is hero? In the big blind, under the gun, goes ahead and min opens. This is a 10NL game, so under the gun makes it 20 cents to go. 1/5 of a dollar, button calls, small blind calls, hero calls. So the villain that we just described there is the under the gun villain, so he's the min opener. So immediately when a fish min opens here, like, you can usually assume that his range, like, he's a 47-10, his range is going to be a little bit less capped than a limping range would be. Like, he is going to show up with typically stronger stuff. Like, the min open can be quite a wide range of hands, but it's certainly not the case that we could ever go to like crazy assumptions like villain can't have aces because he'd want to protect them. Like, never prescribe actual exact thoughts like that to your opponent. You're just going to be going down the wrong route. Instead, just say, well, the fish is going to have a fairly tighter range than most fish, but still a fairly wide range, in the sense that he could still show up with like king 10 off and you wouldn't be like shocked or whatever. So it's likely undefined. There's just likely a bunch of random stuff in here, but I wouldn't expect it to be like total garbage from a 47-10. One mistake that newer players make is that they look at the 47% VPIP and they assume that that's the percentage that he enters every hand with, and they neglect to realise the fact that he actually raised here, which definitely thins his range, which definitely like skews him towards a stronger, more uncapped kind of stuff at the top than it does like whatever. Like if he limped, you would expect to see like 6-4 suited, but when he raises, that hand is severely discounted, which makes like king queen off a bigger portion. So just be conscious of that. So to recap, it gets min opened, it gets called twice on button and small blind. The heroes in the big blind has to call 10 cents into a pot that's already 70 cents. I mean, you're getting a bazillion to 1. You need to call here. Like pot odds of 7 to 1. Like, how are you possibly going to consider folding any real hand with any prospect? And heroes holding king 8 of hearts. So that's certainly a hand with too much prospect to ever consider folding. Clearly squeezing, I think, would be ludicrous, suicidal. It would be to build a big pot, probably still go multi-way, be out of position, not have much fold equity, not have enough frequent strength to get value, just disaster. So raising and folding are both completely out of the question. This is just a spot where we must call. So hero calls at 10 cents, and to the flop of 6, 10, 6, two-tone, 2 hearts here. So heroes flop the flush draw. Let me read Hero's reasoning first of all for calling pre-flop. PF, here I decided to call the min raised by the fish, going 4 away with 2 fish and 1 laggy fishy player. So 2 passive fish and an aggro fish, fair enough. I think this is okay due to the price. I'm playing a pot with 2 fish. Yeah, honestly, like it's okay even if they're good players, because like getting pot odds of 7 to 1, you just need to achieve almost nothing, and you have a hand that is live enough that you can actually win sometimes. Like if you had a hand like king 4 off, I could maybe get behind folding if you had like 3 regs and min open call, but not against like fish, and certainly not with king 8 suited. It's just far too lucrative a hand that has too much nut potential to be folded for that price, even though it is usually not going to flop that well. So pre-flop, your call is definitely absolutely fine. On the flop, what happens is that big blind, we in the small blind checks, hero in the big blind leads the flop for 53 into 80. Now, I really like this. I think this is like a pretty solid play. You can check call here, that's the other option. I think check raising is also kind of out of the question, because if a 47-10 is going to c-bet here, or one of the other fish is going to stab in a 4-way pot, I think you have very limited fold equity with a raise, and it doesn't really make sense to raise a king high flush draw on a paired board without fold equity, because you're clearly not building a big pot for value there. You're taking the worst of it really often when lots of money gets piled in on the flop and turn. You're going to miss most of the time. You don't want to do it unless you can successfully combine a bluff raise with fold equity to make it a semi-bluff raise and not a pure kind of just raise with no fold equity. So you definitely want to go ahead and either check call flop, which has some merits. The merits of check calling flop are that you never get raised on the flop, which is good because we don't really want to get raised on the flop. It just increases, again, the amount of money we have to invest with no fold equity. When we don't have fold equity, we want implied odds to be as good as they can be, and implied odds are a ratio of investment to potential winnings on average from the stacks of our villains and the pot. Now, for implied odds to be better, that investment needs to be smaller in the first place. So when lacking fold equity, it makes a lot more sense to keep the pot smaller and play in a more fit or fold manner, and only pump money into the pot when you're confident that you're significantly ahead of your opponent's range for reciprocating the pumping of money into the pot. So I think that check call has a lot of merit in that sense. Leading's a little dangerous here because there are 3 players that can raise you. I don't think you have any fold equity with the lead anyway, and so it's probably not a disaster if this board just checks through. So I think I maybe just favour check calling because I think fold equity is so limited anyway in a 4-way pot with 3 fish. If you were in a pot where you thought your stab would just pick it up a lot on the flop, then you should absolutely lead here as a semi-bluff and have a leading range on 10-6-6. It's a board that's not going to get c-bet all day long in a 3-way pot. So if people were a bit tighter or it was a bit less multi-way here, I'd really like this lead. I think I've got a slight preference for check calling, just given that it's not a great world when our lead gets called here on the paired board with like the king high flush draw again. These are 2 non-nutted factors. If we had an ace high flush draw on an unpaired board, I'd be much more inclined to just start leading for pseudo value, because you're sort of building a pot there that you are going to make the nuts on, like a reasonable amount, but you're not actually making the nuts here. I think you want to keep the pot smaller. I think like because fold equity is so unlikely against 3 fish, like you're better off just checking and calling, because at least that way you never get raised, you never have to bet fold or bet call, both of which suck, and you just always get to see a turn and realise some implied odds. So I think I prefer check calling due to the fact that there's like almost no fold equity here. But if you inject some fold equity into the situation, I think it quickly does become a lead, and I don't hate leading. I think it does show a nice natural inclination that you should lead your range in multi-way pots. Like in multi-way pots, the range advantage dissipates a little bit because there's just more people that can have a good hand. So it's not the case that under the gun is just going to c-bet all day long because he's the pre-flop raiser. He's got 3 players to get through, and he acknowledges that when he has air, he won't get that much fold equity, and someone will flop like top pair, or pocket pair, flush draw, trips, a boat, something that they'll continue with on this 10-6-6 two-tone board. So what that means is that it's more of a free-for-all, honestly, kind of situation where you don't really need to be the pre-flop raiser to bet. You don't need to make procedural checks anymore to keep all your range consistent. You're not bothered about balance. You don't even mind if we check here and we fold like every hand that we check. That would be okay if we were playing like a leading game. You know, if it was 3-way and the players were a bit less stationary, we could play a leading game here for sure. And then, you know, we'd be very happy against 2 regs here, playing a leading game and just folding when we check in most situations that are like 4-way for sure. Because it just doesn't matter. We're not trying to protect ourselves anymore from any one person bluffing us, because we're already protected just by the presence of the other players in the pot. Like, they can't profit from bluffing us. It doesn't matter if we fold all the time. Like, sure, we have some theoretical duty to defend sometimes, but the fact is, in practical reality, people are not going to be overstabbing here very often, so just exploitatively, just folding everything you check here is probably okay. And, you know, just playing that lead fold strategy in multi-way pots on wetter boards is in general a really good idea. But here, like I say, I just think it's a bit too multi-way and a bit too fish infested to expect any fold equity, and I think you do need that for the leading strategy to make a lot of sense. Also, this will get bet pretty often. Like, there are still like 2 players to act after you, so someone's going to bet here relatively frequently, which means that when you do have the nuts, you could also go for a check raise as well. Like, you could go for a check raise with the nuts, or a check call with the flush draw, that kind of thing. Just stopping yourself from getting raised on a flop when you've got a draw that has no fold equity, I think is a good idea. So, as played, we bet 53 into 80, and under the gun calls the pre-flop fish, who's 47-11 or whatever, and the 2 blinds, the 2 other players, button and small blind, both fold. So we go heads up to the turn, which is the Jack of Hearts. Now, in the Jack of Hearts turn, we make the second nut flush. We're pretty happy with life now. I mean, we should be fairly far ahead of villain's continuing range to a bet, and that is the sub-range that we care about. That's the range that actually matters here. We're less concerned about like his overall range and more bothered about, will he call us with enough worse hands to make value betting good on the turn? And I think evidently he will. Like, he can still have all the overpairs. Often those overpairs have a heart, like queens with a heart, aces with a heart. Even if they don't, you've got to ask yourself how often like a 46-10 is going to actually fold an overpair to a turn bet here. I still think it's not going to be all day long that they're doing that. He could even have some hand like a 10 he still wants to call with, a 10 with the ace of hearts, that kind of thing. Could have like, I don't know, like Jack 10 for 2 pair. Yeah, I'm kind of struggling to find like more hands, but certainly overpairs and some 10x. And maybe even some 6x if he randomly opens like ace 6 or 6-7 under the gun. It can happen for sure. He only opened for min, so it could just be the way he plays those hands sometimes. So definitely enough stuff that we can value bet. We certainly don't want to check call. Like, we should note here that our hand is not like an extreme powerhouse. It's not like the nuts. It's very far from it actually, because it does lose to pocket jacks, pocket 10s, and any nut flush. So it's not close to the nuts, but it's still very strong nonetheless. So if we need to choose between check folding, check calling, and betting, like betting just wins hands down. Because if we check call, we're saying to villain, okay, you can play your range fit or fold now, you can check back stuff you're worried about that may not be good anymore, like overpairs, or even take a free card with like ace king with ace of hearts, which could, or ace queen with ace of hearts, sorry, we have the king of hearts. Well, I guess you could have ace king with the ace of hearts and not the king of hearts, yeah. You could have a hand like that for sure that you just peel flop with stubbornly. But whatever, like we stop him taking free cards with all those hands that we can get value from, and at the same time we don't skew the range that we put money in against to being like loads of better hands and not that many worse hands. Because against a passive player, if you check because you think your flush is not that nutted and you want to keep the pot smaller, that reasoning is just totally flawed, because you're giving villain the green light to play fit or fold. If he plays fit or fold, he checks back weaker stuff and he bets a lot of stronger stuff. He'll bet some weaker stuff too. I'm not saying that if you check, you should check fold. Like, you definitely shouldn't. You should check call. But you shouldn't check, period, because betting is higher EV than check calling, which is higher EV than check folding. So betting here should just clearly be the best line. So we bet 53 into 80. I think the sizing's okay. I don't want to go like enormous here, but I don't want to go too small either. I just want the fish to like make a standard call with an overpair, with ace jack, with ace 10, with whatever, ace of hearts X. Just whatever hand he's made it this turn with, that's fine. We just like target the bulk of his range and make a normal standard size bet. That's okay. Sorry, turn sizings. I just read the flop sizing again. So flop we bet 53 into 80. Then on the turn, the pot is $1.86, effective stacks for around $10. And we bet $1.24 into $1.86, so we bet like 2/3 pot, which I think is great. Hero's Reasoning, I complete my flush draw and c-bet for value and villain calls. Okay, fair enough. Maybe gone into a bit more detail here about why that's better than check calling, why it's better than check folding, but I guess that's implied that you know that anyway. So, villain calls the turn and the river comes down a king of spades. So, the board is now 10-6-6 jack king. So now pocket kings beats you, jack still beats you, quad still beats you, set of flopped bolt with pocket 10 still beats you, and nut flushes beat you. So your hand is definitely like pretty far from nutted, but it is probably still good enough that you can go ahead and bet for value against like, well, honestly now value is getting thinner. Like there are still some worse flushes in there, definitely some, like not many actually, like queen X of hearts, like 9-8 of hearts, yeah, you have the 8 of hearts. No, there aren't many worse flushes at all, because you need to remember that the guy doesn't really open that many worse flushes, but you will be opening like ace X of hearts for better flushes. So you're going to be struggling if you're looking to get called by worse flushes specifically. However, you can probably still get called by some combos of like pocket queens that are stubborn, some kind of 2-pair like king 10, king jack, stuff like that, maybe ace king, these. But I'm kind of reaching now, so I think value here is actually getting quite thin. And Hero decides to bet 325 into 434, which I just think is too big now. Like I think like even though this is a fish, like your hand is still relatively not as good as it looks here. And I think that's a good argument for like just check calling flop as well, just in, you know, playing a bit, keeping the pot a bit smaller. Because if your hand's this weak in a spot where you go bet, you definitely don't want to be getting raised on the flop and continuing. You don't also want to fold the flop to a raise either. So I mean, I think it just furthers the case for checking flop. But anyway, as played, like betting 325 into 434, I think it's a bit big. I think we should bet fold and bet fold something like 250. Now, villain min raises, like he makes it, it's actually a power min raise. Like he makes it 704 when we've made it 325. So he's made it another 379. So it's not even just a normal raise. It's not a normal fish min raise. It's a fish min raise plus a little bit. This looks insanely nutted to me. Now, Hero reasons he has included the results that he called the min raise. So he says, on the river, I see bet for value, too large in my opinion, and the fish min raises me here. I was going to fold expecting to see full house here a lot, and nut flushes, of course, until I did some further inspecting and found that his river aggression is 38%. See, this is the kind of situation where you're literally just looking at a stat that's had hardly any instances to converge over like 400 or something hands, and you're making like a ridiculous assumption that it's actually meaningful. Like his river aggression being 38% is totally meaningless, because you know what kind of player he is. You know that he's stationary, you know that he's passive, you know that he doesn't raise pre-flop, you know that he has a low AF. These things you do know over that sample. Like his river aggression is very much affected by variance. You don't play that many rivers even when you're at 47-11. You play a lot more pre-flops, flops, and turns than you do rivers. Massively. So, don't look at that. You're just basically finding a reason to call here that's not a very good one at all. Like, the only reason that I can see that should convince someone to call here, and I don't think this spot is a call, I think we could probably fold here, but if I was going to call this river, it would simply be because the price is amazing. Like, I need to call another 379 into a pot that is already about 1459, 1460. So you can go like 379 into 1460 plus 379. So 379 into, well, it's going to be about $18, just shy of $18. I mean, great pot odds, arguably. Sure, let me find my calculator, if that exists somewhere in my computer. So we do just roughly here, since we don't have all day, we'll just do roughly 379 divided by 18, something like that. And we can see that our RE, required equity, is 21%. Now that's not negligible. Like, you don't want to fall into the trap of being like, oh, it's under 25%, it's just negligible, we can clearly call. I don't think you are good 21% at this time on this river. I think that you should fold this river, because you're good, like, a good bit less than this. I'd expect to have like 10% equity, maybe, not 21%. So I think river is a fold. Right, I better shoot off now because I have to leave the house, so I'm going to wrap up the podcast and get it posted for you guys. So thank you very much for listening, and once more, if you want to get in touch with me about coaching, the email address is admin@carrotcorner.com. Hit me up, or if you want to join the group or whatever, and I'd love to hear feedback about the Carrot Poker podcast, what you might like to hear on it, or if you're a listener who thinks that you might make an interesting guest on the podcast, like, please get in touch with me as well, and we can talk about that. All right, guys. Thank you very much for listening, and see you in the next one. Good luck at the tables.